we have a history that subsidies have not yielded the best results. And so when we're talking about commercial farming and agriculture reforms, this needs to be at the heart of our mind, because issues of subsidies do not yield what we have always wanted to get. So we are proposing that probably we have 10 to 15 high potential irrigation corridors, fully develop them to full commercial irrigation zones, probably using solar, and then report hectares irrigated, yields, market sales, employment created quarterly. This needs to be reported quarterly in such a way that there should be accountability. Because the moment we just say, maybe we have mega farms, we are doing farming, but we don't account, then I think it will be business as usual, and we'll come back 2030 with the same problems. We also need to create some exports, maize, soya, rice, horticulture clusters, which are linked to agro-processing. We didn't talk about manufacturing, but these should be linked to agro-processing through contract farming, through anchor farms, warehouse receipt, and probably ADMAC can now be used as a warehouse receipt system, having this commodity exchange, which was also mentioned in the Nerp, and guaranteed market access. Sometimes farmers tend to be frustrated because they cannot have an access to a market that is productive, that can give them the required finance. But also, when we look at the ATMM, which we have always touted about, and then we look at how we finance the ATMM, I left a gap, between the A and the TMM, because we tend to focus so much on the agriculture sector, while we know that we have potential in tourism, in mining, and in manufacturing that can indeed uplift the economy. We note that the budget is skewed towards agricultural crops and animals, contributing 3.8% and 4.3% to the agriculture contribution to GDP. But if we look at forestry and aquaculture, they actually contribute more than what we normally fund. And even the 2026-27 budget, 19.9% of development resources went into wealth creation under HMM, but 89.8% of that was into tourism, into agriculture, with manufacturing, tourism, and mining, just getting all these bits and pieces. So we believe that if we could only focus or reallocate the resources rightly to the sectors which have potential gains for growth, and not just focusing on the agriculture sector, then indeed we should be able to achieve the Nerp's expected gains. And also on fiscal consolidation, Nerp seeks to have fiscal discipline and debt sustainability. But we also believe that when we are talking about raising taxes, maybe resource mobilization, we should not focus on this only, while forgetting on controlling spending and closing leakages. We have always been talking about the leakages from where we collect the revenues to all the way to where we spend. And public sector corruption, this is from the audit reports, but also tax justice, it estimates 18 to 30 billion from fees and procurement. And we are talking about corporate tax evasion, profit shifting, transfer pricing, 60+ billion, which is $33 million, and at least 65% of potential tax revenue evaded. This is from Evangelical Association of Malawi. So we also have a problem even in mining, where we're talking about illegal mining, gold and gemstones disappearing. The Ministry of Natural Resources is estimated about 540 to 900 billion Malawi kwacha. Now, we can be focusing on the small pieces of corruption and while we are leaving a huge chunk of uncollected taxes just because others are evading tax, or probably we are losing just because our gold and our minerals are just going outside the border. And we made a few proposals. I will not go through all of them because I'll submit this to the ministry. But especially on transfer pricing, I believe that MRA needs a dedicated, well-funded transfer pricing unit. We've seen this in Kenya and in South Africa to audit intra-company loans and royalty payments to tax havens. But also we need to check local investment laws. Probably we need some set of amount, setting some amount probably to be reinvested into the country whenever the profits have been earned. This also we've seen in other countries. I think in Tanzania there was a change in that. But also on illegal mining and raw minerals exports, we need to have full disclosures on revenues or minerals produced, because we cannot, police what we don't know. And every time we are leaving maybe geological surveys and everything regarding minerals to investors, I believe that as a country we need to invest or fund a national airborne geophysical survey, because this will actually now show the investors where is what, and even the government will know how much is where, in such a way that whenever minerals are leaving, we should know how much is going out and unaccounted. And also on Forex, Nerp identifies exports, gold monetization, surrender requirements, adjustment, and so many others. But borrowing a leaf from Kenya, they are focusing on horticulture. And where I was reading $1 billion in 2024 in exports. Tourism, 452 billion Kenyan shillings. And I believe our focus on agriculture actually makes us not to see what others are doing out there, in such a way that if probably we could just shift a little of the resources that we pump in agriculture, probably we could be earning Forex that we could not earn when we are just focusing simply on tobacco, macadamia, and others. And also should create export delivery compacts for exports and require import declaration form match with pre-export verification. Most of the times, people can claim to export, but what comes in is not what actually goes out. And also sometimes what they are asking to import does not match with what they generated. I always ask, if you do not generate Forex, why do you import so much? So probably we should also be checking some non-essential imports that we are importing as a country. For example, maybe bottled water, unprocessed construction materials, and so many others. If we could do this, I saw an example, Kenya reduced about 18% of the imports by just cutting or taking out some of the non-essential imports. And also on the same mining paradox, Nerp is targeting mining that to hit 20% of GDP. In December, we sat on the public finance review by World Bank, and they were saying even if 7 projects, major mines, start off at once, it will just be $200 to $500 million. So the over-optimistic sometimes let us down, because we go up all the way to 2030, and maybe we don't get what we thought we'll get. However, we noted as ECAMA that the real issue is not mining potential, but contract governance. And so we believe that if maybe Parliament could at least start reviewing all the mining contracts. We saw the contracts being reviewed in Tanzania, and when they reviewed, they at least got 16% free carried interest, but also 50% of share of super profits. Probably this is where we need to be going, so that we should be getting the values of the minerals that we have. And also have contract validation clause before mining license renewal or even granting it. And also a reaction on other targeted outcomes. So we just briefly talked about the inflation basket. it is possible to go all the way to 15% at the end of the year. However, at ECAMA, we thought if we could be cutting inflation by 1.5 every month, then that will happen. But then we look at inflation coming from food, from housing, from water, from electricity, transport, and communication, in that order. And also, we know that if you were to address inflation, then you also need to keep these other variables in check. And so if we just don't have the buffers to cushion, everything that comes unexpectedly, we just saw what Hormuz clothes did to us. So if we don't cushion, for example, the shocks, the wars, the pandemics, the weather, then it is hard to just talk about inflation. So we should think of how to cushion these other issues. And on health reforms, indeed, transitioning to cost-reflective health financing will help address the gaps in health financing. We've seen a huge chunk taken out by maybe the stopping of USAID and others. However, we should learn from FISP on poor targeting, on leakages, and also on resource waste, just to strengthen implementation of what we want to do, because we have lessons that we can learn from. And also, we can at least state that we have mandatory health insurance payment for all the people in the formal jobs, because we know they are earning formally, they can get some amount being deducted and finance their health contributory, just like the way we do with pension. However, there are others who are maybe in the informal. We're talking of over maybe 80% of the population or so. There should be a way. We don't believe that people are too poor, they cannot pay. There are indeed a certain population which is vulnerable and that needs to access free medical care, free health services. However, if you purchase airtime, you should be able to contribute something to the health. So we believe that government can actually partner with the mobile money platforms to collect small premiums, contributory, whether weekly, monthly, and so on, and indeed this can lessen the burden on health financing. And on governance, we've seen governance being a problem, and we know that we just need to fix the systems. Sometimes we behave as if there are no laws, but if we can have systems that are working for all Malawians, then indeed our economy will attract what it needs to be attracted, will develop, and indeed will grow. On infrastructure reform, introducing BOT, PPP models, we believe that government can support private sector-led infrastructure initiatives and acquire equity stakes. And we believe that if maybe there is a history of non-payment of maybe those who have provided services, especially in infrastructure, probably we need to earmark some fuel levies or target fees for such infrastructure so that at least our part should be paid. And also on M&E plan and implementation of that, ECAMA recommends that Nerp highlights ways in which challenges identified can be solved, and also including ways in which institutional capacity can be strengthened. And to effectively monitor implementation, the government should develop realistic and also independent KPIs. We are saying independent because you cannot be an implementer and then an assessor yourself. So probably there need to be a certain group that can be set up just to assess this, either quarterly, monthly, or yearly, or so on, so that at least we get the results that we want. And in conclusion, ECAMA believes that Nerp should be judged not by the number of interventions it lists, but by whether it creates a delivery system. And the evidence is clear. Recovery works where countries sequence reforms, they assign responsibilities to specific areas because they cannot be implemented by one institution, and also measure performance, protect implementation, and link public spending to production, to exports, and to jobs. Meaning that there has to be full accountability when you are spending as to how much are we creating for the economy, how much growth is coming in, jobs, and so on. As such, the success of Nerp will not be determined by the quality of its diagnosis, but by the strength of its implementation architecture. And so as ECAMA, we are recommending that every intervention be accompanied by a delivery mechanism, a financing strategy, and institutional responsibility so that others should be held accountable. Measurable targets. If the targets are not met, so what? Who gets, be questioned? And also independent monitoring and consequences for non-performance. Because it seems like there are no consequences for not doing things in this country, and this has led us to be where we are. And we believe that Malawi's challenge is no longer identifying what needs to be done. It is actually building systems that ensure things get done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Another big round of applause. I've listened to Madam Bertha so many times. I've never heard her being as optimistic as she sounded today. Normally, she's quite scathing when she speaks about issues of this nature. I liked her closing. The success of Nerp will be measured by, should be evidence-based in terms of that success. She highlighted financing has to be very clear, the delivery mechanisms, accountability, the institutions that need to measure that. And I think she's also provided quite a number of practical aspects, I think, in her response on behalf of ECAMA. I think horticulture, Honorable Minister, tourism, we tend to talk about agriculture. Now we're talking more about mining. But as those of you that have read the World Bank reports will attest to the fact that the World Bank reports have actually moderated our expectations, because you can have a resource curse if you're not careful. So we need to make sure that we need to also be focusing on some of the other areas. I think very interesting, practical, I think, suggestions around food security, beyond subsidies, what do we need to do? I like the idea of 10 to 15 irrigation schemes, which we measure on a quarterly basis. In other words, she's saying who does what, by when, and who gets to be held accountable. At the bank where I work, I've learned a new word. Who do you chop? So who do you grab by the neck and say you haven't delivered? And I think that's going to be the theme as we get to closing our session later today. Another big hand for ECAMA. We'll now get to hear from MCCI, and that will be led by Madam Daisy Kambalami. Please give her a round of applause as she comes in front.
Honorable Ministers, Our Excellencies here present, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, allow me to ride on the protocols that have already been observed, and I'll quickly go through our reaction, and we'll also be making a formal presentation and submission to the Ministry on the key issues that we've raised from the private sector perspective. But I think key to the issues, we can move to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. I think the main issue is to really look at how are we investing? How are we making decisions to make this theory of change a reality and not just another narrative? And as we focus on that, we'll look at some of the experience that we've had and we've seen from other countries, such as Rwanda, Ghana, and Vietnam, that shows that recovery plans succeed when they focus on a few high impact priorities. And I think that has also been mentioned earlier. In Malawi, though, especially looking at where we are, we need to also focus on how we're going to anchor our Nerp on mobilization of private sector resources. And there are specific examples that I'll also touch on as I go through my presentation today. But Honorable Minister, I think all these consultations and the beautiful document that we have before us, which is the National Economic Recovery Plan, will be mute if we really don't look at implementation. and not just implementation, but the need for purposeful and decisive decision-making, and ensuring that we are sticking to the plan, even when sometimes that implementation becomes painful and sometimes not politically popular. I think those are the times that we lose focus and we start to divert from the plans. Some of the key binding constraints that we've all been highlighting, and I think we've all acknowledged, we wanted to highlight the ones that affect the private sector most, looking at access to foreign exchange, high inflation and interest rates that actually affects directly the products that we produce, and even when we're looking at export, looking at affordable financing, high transport and energy costs, and sometimes the regulatory and administrative burdens that are placed. One of the companies actually indicated to us that sometimes in Malawi it's more difficult to export than to import because of just the administrative burdens that we incur and experience. Low industrial competitiveness, sometimes due to limited incentives. So the private sector actually recognizes that the Nerp intends to address most of these, but the challenges sometimes are also quite structural, and we need to actually have that intention of addressing them. As I go through our reaction, I would want to touch on these general issues that I've addressed and highlighted. Later on, I'll go into specific sector issues, especially the ones that we highlight on the ATMM. Limited access to foreign exchange. Now, we talk about the private sector as the engine of growth, and the ones that are going to generate the forex that we need as a country. The challenge then comes when we try and convince private sector to export, only to know that they will not have access to the same forex when they need to import machinery for production. So I think this is the balance that we need to actually also consider. How do we encourage those that are exporting or producing for export to retain more of the capital that they generate? So they're not asking for someone to generate for them, but the ones that they generate so that they can use to expand that export base. Otherwise, we'll continue begging and asking, and people will not invest in those priorities because at the end of the day, they still need to be able to produce. We need to look at even some of the loopholes, and I think leakage has also been mentioned earlier, but also ensure that we are looking at supporting export market development and also value addition on these products. When we look at high inflation and interest rates, accelerating fiscal consolidation and reducing government domestic borrowing has been mentioned, strengthening monetary policy coordination, and establishing targeted concessionary financing windows for productive sectors. And I think this is where we start to really look at how we engage even with our development partners, because I've heard so many talk about the support that they want to provide to private sector. But sometimes it's not done or structured in a practical manner that makes it usable for the private sector that are expected to access these projects. Continuing on, especially focusing now on SMEs, their risk factors are different maybe from some of the large companies. So we need to really look at how are we structuring the credit guarantees that we provide for SMEs, and also looking at development funds for agriculture, manufacturing, and tourism. Promoting blended financing and risk-sharing facilities are also key, and also looking at strengthening credit information systems and movable collateral registries. That will actually enable SMEs to actually also use those movable assets as part of their collateral to be able to access financing. As we look at high transport costs, at energy costs, some of the proposals that we have is looking at accelerate investments in railroad and broader infrastructure and logistics hubs. We've talked about the PPP arrangements that are being proposed and fast-tracking some of those, and also looking at fast-tracking energy generation projects and transmission upgrades. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to invest in mining or we're going to really look at expanding manufacturing, we can't really do it if we're going to not have access to affordable energy. And even looking at our industrial electricity tariffs, these have to, as we continue to expand, that will ensure that we now have competitive rates that can actually enable expansion of industry. There's been a proposal to try and improve our industrialization and also our to address the constraint of low industrial competitiveness. And some of the proposals really looks at support for special economic zones and involvement of the private sector in those structures, strengthening standards and quality infrastructure, conformity to assessment systems where there is feedback that is received timely and in a manner that actually enables the private sector to access services quickly. And also promotion of local value addition and supply chain development. I think these are quite general, but the key issue is to look at what is Malawi good at. And there's always that balance that we have to really look at. Are we focusing on import substitution or producing for export? But if we cannot supply our own local markets and get expertise in those productive sectors, it becomes a challenge to even tap into other markets or producing for other markets because we've not strengthened our own local value chains. In improving competitiveness, we have to really look at and overhaul our tax investment tax credits and also the accelerated depreciation allowances. Providing duty-free importation of productive machinery. We know that this is available, but what has happened so far is that it's because the knowledge is only sometimes available to the privileged. You find that even as a chamber, when we go to MRA, they'll say, oh, this facility is there, but how many people actually have that knowledge and information? So making sure that information is readily available for industry to use. Now I'll go down into specific issues. One of the things that people have really lamented is the limited participation of local companies in the mining sector. But we believe that by pooling such resources into an investment fund that can be tapped into and we actually collaborate, we can achieve a lot more because everyone's worried about flight of capital. But if we can actually use the funds that are available, whether it's the pension funds or what the banks have, by pooling such resources and having capital that we invest, because we can't continue asking for share capital in investments in mining if we're actually not putting in any capital into that investment. But at a later stage, also looking at how do we now create a sovereign wealth fund where everyone's able to benefit from what is being generated. In the meantime, we need to actually also look at, oh, sorry, I think the presentation was moving a bit slower than I was talking. My apologies for that. But in the meantime, we also need to look at the current mining development agreements that are already on paper, and we know that these are potential projects and are ready to go. Let's expedite on that because that will also unlock some of the capital that we're looking at. And yes, we want to be careful and ensure that we have agreements that we feel comfortable with, but that should not be an excuse that continues to delay us implementing such projects. Okay, can we go to the mining and energy slide, which is after that one? Thank you very much. So I've already spoken to the first priority area. The second one was looking at energy generation. And the fact that, yes, some of the salient issues is inadequate and unreliable energy supply, which actually constrains industrial growth and also the potential for mining. We have ready projects that are there. We've talked about in Padamanga. I think this is something that everyone's excited about, the additional energy that we'll have. but ensuring that actually that is now moving quite speedily into reality. Amending the Electricity Act to attract investment, and also ensuring that we strengthen the participation of independent power producers. I think this is something that we really need to look at how practical it's going to be, and also having a dedicated group that is going to look at such issues and how and the changes that need to happen. Next one. We need to look at how we are marketing our products. I think that has also been touched on earlier, but also ensuring that we have NGOs that are also safeguarding the interests of the communities where these mining activities are happening. The over-reliance on importation of fuel, I think we do have an opportunity with ethanol and other projects to look at how can we review and strengthen the national ethanol blending policies to increase blending ratios where feasible, and also facilitate private sector investment in ethanol production and storage, and also distribution infrastructure. The support for expansion of feedstock throughout grower schemes and also commercial agriculture. These are the opportunities that we have. And also looking at development of incentives for investment in renewable energy and also alternative fuel technologies, including biofuel and also electric mobility. We've seen that even with solar energy, some have been able to power motorbikes and actually use those for delivery. There's so many innovations that can be used to try and have more energy efficiency. I have 3 more slides, don't worry, I'll be done soon. I'll quickly go through agriculture and the need for commercialization. I think that has already been highlighted. But also looking at having a discussion, we just had a discussion earlier on financing for the productive sectors, and the fact that we need to actually have projects that are ready for financing. I think most of the challenges that we find is that people would have nice ideas, and you think that is going to help the bank or stimulate the bank to invest. But being able to actually look at those potential and see how we develop them into bankable projects when it comes to commercialization. Looking at the structures that we have, such as ADMAC and other structures of marketing, and including commodity exchanges that we have, how do we strengthen those to have more participation of the private sector in this value chain promotion and marketing? Tourism, I'll quickly go through improving air access and tourism infrastructure, developing pipelines for bankable tourism PPP projects, because most of them are huge and cannot be done sometimes by one individual institution, but sometimes you actually need to look at concessions and also some of the frameworks that can actually help to have private and public sector partnership in such. And then strengthening the tourism governance and skills development, because this is also an exportable product, but it's also needed because the experience that people have when they visit your country, especially for tourism, is also paramount to ensuring that we are delivering. And finally, as we look at trade facilitation and also implementation, I think some of the key issues that we wanted to highlight were just the high cost of logistics and a broader cost of doing business, policy misalignment and excessive taxation affecting domestic production and exports. I think on implementation, one of the issues that we noted was that the Nerp really goes to identify which ministries and how the ministries are going to be set up and how government is going to implement. But there is no interface really with the private sector, how we're going to monitor, and even the commitments from the private sector. We do have a structure of the Public-Private Dialogue Forum, which actually creates space for holding each other accountable. Because if every Malawian, including the private sector, are going to be involved in implementation, we need to be holding each other accountable. Private sector is looking at investing in all these areas that will actually make the National Economic Recovery Plan a reality. But Without that real interface and that engagement on the ground, apart from just forums like this, which become easy to present and yeah, we go home and continue doing what we're doing, how do we continue to meet together? So we really want to encourage the implementation of an effective public-private dialogue framework that actually looks at a structured and merit-based mechanism, sets up technical working groups that addresses some of the constraints that are coming from the private sector and even from implementation and the challenges that government also perceives and sees, that are going to be used as a conduit for revitalizing the manufacturing base for Malawi, and also looking at creating a unified platform for evidence-based policy engagement. As I conclude, the private sector is really looking at this as a tool for recovery, stability, and growth. But achieving the Nerp goals requires more conducive business environment that addresses some of those structure changes that I've mentioned earlier. Priority should be given to investments in agriculture, mining, and energy, rather than in issues that actually just encourages consumption. The private sector calls for a result-based implementation approach with clear targets and strong public-private dialogue and accountability. Success depends on policy consistency, timely reforms, and also collaboration between the private sector and government. With the right incentives, partnership, private sector investment can drive Malawi's transition to a resilient, competitive, and inclusive, and also export-oriented economy by 2030. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Daisy. Another big round of applause for Daisy. We've heard it ourselves, the private sector is ready. We're ready, but I think we need, I know your Honorable Minister is not within your ministry, but the Minister of Industrialization, Business, Trade and Tourism, I think that's correct, to create the PPDF. We haven't had any operational PPDF, I think, close to a decade now. The last time I remember we had a PPDF was when the Honorable Minister himself for Trade was actually co-chair of PPDF. So we need that to unlock some of these things that have been highlighted. But I think what's also coming out very clearly, ADMAC has been mentioned within the agriculture sector. I think a reform to that institution is critical, but also in terms of some of the things, Honorable Minister, you announced in your budget statement, the commodity exchange, an effective commodity exchange. I think it also means that even on the mining side, we have to be thinking ahead based on some of the recommendations I think that have been made here. But I'm continuously hearing the same words: accountability, execution, prioritization. We can't do everything. We need to make sure that I think that's covered. Maybe my last point in reaction to that is just access to capital. I've heard from the other presentation, I hope we've all heard that, PPPs, BOTs, maybe we need to think about, SPVs, if we're going to attract the private sector credit. Because with the fiscus the way it is, I don't believe that we can achieve what is in the Nerp without the private sector. So powerful, powerful presentation. Another big round of applause for Madam Beze. We'll now move to the next presentation, which will be delivered by, is it Unima? Yes. No, because I had two agendas. And, let's give a round of applause. Oh, okay. This is Professor Chiwaula. I think let's acknowledge him by giving him another round of applause. I forgot his name. Thank you.
Thank you, Director of Ceremonies, Honorable Ministers, all protocols observed. I will not take a lot of time because I was requested by the university to attend this meeting. I was shared with the draft plan. I read it. Around 8:30 when I was getting to this room, someone from the ministry smiled at me and said, where is the presentation? So I said, which presentation? And he said, you are supposed to make a presentation. And I said, all right, okay. I have the ideas, but I don't have the presentation. So, honorable ministers, I put together the ideas I had. It's not as structured. We will submit later. But I think this will still be useful for this gathering. To begin with, the university, as I've said, we are grateful that we have been included in this process. And we agree with the move of the government that there is need for recovery. The economy in the current state needs recovering. And the sectors that have been targeted, we think they are right sectors, but some of the sectors we think they are not really necessary for a recovery. We think a recovery process, as I think Ekama also said, we need to target a few high-impact sectors. Some of the investments, for example, in the health sector, apart from maybe the cost recovery, may not necessarily be on the recovery agenda, although it is a necessary investment that the country must embark on, but not as a recovery plan. We also want to say, as a general remark, that we need to make sure that as we are implementing the recovery plan, we do not lose sight on our long-term plan, because still we want by 2063 to achieve our aspirations. So let's make sure that we don't lose sight on that. When Mr. Zembere was presenting, he indicated that NIP 2025 to 2030 is aligned with the MIP 1, which implies aligned with the Malawi 2063. That's good, it has been said, but we really want the nitty-gritties to be sure that we are not just mapping on a diagram to show that these are being mapped against each other, but there should be real implementation of also the other items or investments that are in MIP 1, which may not be part of NEP. The last general remark, before I go to the specifics, is that when we are implementing this, we should also look at policy consistency. I've picked an example. Because of the tight fiscus, we are in the NEP, we are proposing cost recovery in the secondary and tertiary health services or sector. But we are proposing this at the time when we have also gone for free secondary education. I am saying it may be necessary. There are some people who may be willing and able to pay within the secondary education, although we also know that we have the vulnerable. So the cost recovery should be almost in all sectors, but those who are vulnerable should be protected. Those who are not able to pay, rather those who are able to pay, they should be enabled to pay for these services. As somebody has said on this podium, there will be need for some changes, maybe some things we thought we would do, but we will not do them because we realize that at this point we need to recover. So some of the things we may need to change. Going forward from here, I'll go through some specific points, honorable ministers, your excellencies. Just as I've said, the points we have identified for different sections of the document. First of all, on the principles, we agree with the principles, but we noted that there is a lot of emphasis on privatization. We have fiscal realism as a principle, but the narrative under that is talking about privatization, yet we already have another point on privatization. So we say probably on fiscal realism, we should focus on spending within our means, which has been one of the things that has led us to the situation we are in. Similarly, on accountability and results orientation, we are saying there should also be emphasis on budget monitoring by MDAs as well as SOEs. I know this happens, but we need to emphasize that as we are on the recovery plan or recovery journey, this should be something that we should put a lot of emphasis on, because as far as we will not be managing our fiscus, it means that even the debt restructuring processes, they will not yield the efforts that we are putting in place. On the expected gains, we are thinking that the aspirations, because these are not the actuals, but the aspirations on the growth in the agricultural, mining, and probably tourism and manufacturing, they are not as high as we would want. We would prefer if we project higher, and then we look at if we are to achieve this type of growth, what type of investments should we do? Because, look, we have been targeting 6% growth, and we have been off that target growth for 6 years ago. So for us to really gain, it's almost like someone who is participating in a marathon. You started poorly. For you to make sure that you catch up with those who are ahead of you, you need to run faster. So in terms of growth, I think the projections we are making for this period for agriculture, mining, and manufacturing, they are lower than what we want to achieve. So the idea is, can we page this higher and then look at what type of investments can take us to those new levels. We agree with the a number of points on the fiscal policy, but one of the things, as somebody has said about implementation, we are saying let's aim at ways on how we can walk the talk. The things we have written are very good, but the Nerp should really indicate how are we going to make sure that whatever we have put in place, we are going to implement. I think that's one of the most important part when it comes to the fiscus. There is also a proposal on promoting innovation and financial inclusion. We are saying this is good, but an additional element, because we still see that some businesses, they are still not accepting payments through mobile money, which is the most common by most Malawians. We are saying, can we make really this mandatory so that we should all Malawians should be paying through this, and at the end, it means that we will reduce our transaction costs, including for the central bank, the cost of printing the currency. Again, on the how, we are proposing youth and women loans in the constituencies, 100, I think, billion for the youth. Again, this is a good initiative, but I think the NIP should also work on implementation. Effectiveness of these loans will depend on who is running these, because we are not all, with all of us, we don't have the capacity to manage loan facilities. So we have said that we have these loans, but it is not clear who will be managing them. If we don't give these responsibilities to institutions that have capacity, this will be as simple as just giving people money for consumption. But I think the idea is that these loans should be used for businesses, should be used for production, so that the economy should grow. So for us to make sure that people are not borrowing to default, we should give this responsibility to institutions that are able also to collect our loans back. On foreign exchange management, we are saying there should be clear strategies to broaden the tax base to the informal sector, agreeing with both MCCI and ECAMA. And again, we also think the strategy should recognize, the strategy recognizes that the remittances have declined. We think probably the remittances are still coming, but in different forms. The issue of the people trying to run away from some of the unfavorable policies. So it is necessary that we understand how people are still bringing remittances and how can we tap them back into the formal sector. Again, only something I did not put on the previous slide, I'll come back to this slide, is that we also need to find a way of prioritizing forex allocation to those people who are generating forex. If an exporter, somebody who is exporting, is applying for forex, there should be a way of prioritizing them, because it's simple. Taking from Mr. Zembere, so if someone has contributed to generation of forex, that person should be also prioritized, because that investment will generate more forex in the future. We can go to the next slide. I know there is a talk of agriculture that maybe we overemphasize on agriculture. Agriculture on itself is not bad, but I think the way we do agriculture is bad. So there is need still for us to do the right things within agriculture. There are a number of proposals in the recovery plan. I want to comment on one proposal on the mega farms, which the Nerp is saying the government will establish, or we are going to establish government-owned mega farms. And I'm saying this cannot be part of a recovery plan, because a recovery plan wanted to get the returns as soon as possible. If you look at the government, it will take, look at the government systems. If they make the decision today to start a mega farm, how long will it take? 2030 will not see anything. But we have already private sector players who are involved in producing. Can we work with them? Can we subcontract them so that they should produce whatever outputs we are looking for? In terms of the crops to be grown, we are saying let's also work on the already established frameworks. For example, NES 2, it has a list of prioritized value chains which we should work on. I have 2 minutes, okay. The last thing on this point is that on the initiatives on agriculture, I still think initiatives to improve soil health are missing. This is very important because we have been investing a lot of money in input subsidies, but the fertilizer and improved seeds we have been investing money on, the returns are so low because our soils are poor. So it looks a little bit of nitty-gritty, but this is a very important idea that should be included as an initiative within the agricultural investments. On infrastructure, we applaud the drafters for proposing the BOT mode for constructing some of the roads. I think this is good. And we are saying for air transport, probably the emphasis is on international travel, but probably should also think of improving local travel. So some of the air bases probably can be used for local air transport, so that we should facilitate mobility of people within the country. Probably this is my last slide. So thank you, honorable ministers. As I've said, we just put together the ideas, but we'll improve this for the submission. Thank you.
I think the professor already had a presentation prepared. Yeah? Let's give him another round of applause. Huh? Fantastic. I think great ideas. I mean, interesting to hear, and I think that's a big elephant in the room. We'll ask the governor and his deputies later on maybe to just share on FX management, suggestions around directing resources where they can generate foreign currency. I think it keeps on cropping up in the various conversations that have been there. Buena CG from MRA, a lot of issues around broadening the tax base, whether it's through FX management or through the payment systems. Because if a lot of people are in the payment system, digital platforms, it actually broadens that base because you know who is doing business, who is doing what, and I think that's consistent across all the responses that have come from the 4 institutions. And also very interesting thoughts. I'm tempted here to mention a few institutions. You have the NAS farms, you have the Lovos, you have the tobacco companies. Maybe they can actually be part of the mega farm initiative. And we need to think about that, I think, differently when we look at mega farms and what we want to do in agriculture. So another big round of applause for the professor. Thank you very much. We'll now listen to Bankers Association of Malawi, being represented by Mrs. Temwani Simwaka. And I'm sure everybody is salivating here that I think all our issues are solved now. Nerp can be financed, yeah. So let's give her a round of applause as she comes in front of us.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I'm not sure if people are hungry or they're tired of listening to bankers. Thank you very much. I will just quickly talk to a few of our responses as Bankers Association of Malawi. As I was already introduced, I'm Temwani Simwaka. I'm not CEO of Bankers Association. I'm CEO of NBS Bank, but I'm standing here as bankers on behalf of Bankers Association of Malawi. We will submit a written response, but quickly for this morning, a couple of responses from our side. I think the starting point is really around the policy coordination and governance. For financial sector, it's important for policy consistency. I think the issue that we've struggled with is around contradictions in monetary policy, as well as if you combine that with the fiscal policy, then the contradictions make it very difficult for banks to really work well. We really also need transparency when it comes to consistencies between different ministries, from Ministry of Finance to Industry to Tourism, where as a financial services player, you really would want to work across the entire government entities. Just moving on in terms of resource mobilization, the Nerp speaks to resource mobilization, Honorable Minister, but there is, I think, banks are one side for resource mobilization. There is one leg that quickly going through the Nerp as is now has been left out. I think for me, the critical one that you might want to consider, and maybe the CEO of the stock exchange might come in, is really around the stock capital mobilization through the stock market. Where banks are unable to finance long-term projects, the stock exchange is in the right position to mobilize resources and also provide same for tenor. As you would have noted, the stock market has become very volatile at the moment. It's a true indication of the liquidity that is in the market, and everybody has gone in there to chase a few private listings that are there. But other projects that really need resources, the stock exchange, I think Governor will also attest to that, is really the right place for us to include in the Nerp. I thought it was not there. The stock market does not compete with the financial services sector or banks, but rather it complements where the banks fail to meet the demand, especially where there is need for tenor financing. Moving on, is around on evaluation and monitoring. From financial services, we really would want each pillar to develop clear performance indicators so that we can see progress, especially outcomes. It gives confidence to the market, and when there is confidence in the market, it's easier for banks and other institutions then to mobilize resources, both from local markets as well as from international markets. And moving on, I think the banks really would want more emphasis around institutional capacity building. I would maybe give an example of one specific sector in that area, which is the agriculture and agro-processing. So you will see that the banks maybe finance a lot more structured crop and structured processing. So a lot of resources will go to tobacco, to macadamia, to tea, but not much to other equally deserving crops like cotton, groundnuts, soya, and a lot more others, which have a lot more potential. But because there is a missing infrastructure there, we do need to have structured markets, structured off-takers. At the same time, on the flip side, you also need agriculture extension services in those spaces. When you do that, then those crops also become bankable businesses. And in that moment, you will then get banks really extend credit in those areas. I know there has been a call to force banks to maybe allocate lending to a sector, but we do need infrastructure that would support that sector. If the infrastructure is there, financial services will quickly run and invest at all times. As banks, we are open and we are ready to support initiatives that have moved from an idea to a bankable business or a bankable project. And key, what we need in the Nerp, Honorable Minister, is also the project preparatory works, because most of these come to the banks when they haven't reached the level of bankable business. And at the end of the day, as bankers, our role is really to provide financial services. Preparatory works is really a specialist field, and if we could ask that, that could also be considered as a priority, especially that part of the key winning areas in the Nerp include manufacturing, agro-processing, and maybe generally uplift in works coming out of there. All these require project preparatory works, and if we can put an emphasis on skills development in that space to make sure that projects are bankable, it then becomes easier to raise resources both locally as well as globally, especially from impact financiers, for us to be able to finance all those projects. Just moving on around, I think, infrastructure development, Bankers Association of Malawi and its banks, we are ready to support that work. As we said, we really do need projects to turn from a concept to a bankable project. We have already demonstrated as banks that we can actually finance infrastructure, real proper infrastructure projects once these have been have reached a bankable stage. So we are prepared to work with government to build strong foundations for investments, for economic activities, as well as for sustainable development. Moving on to some of the role of banking sector, which is also comes clearly in the Nerp. is really for us to mobilize domestic resources, not only domestic, but as well as FDIs. We are prepared to work with government on the same to expand access to credit across all sectors. And as I already indicated, what we need is really to have infrastructure in place that would make the business bankable. We are ready as bankers to channel investments into productive sectors of the economy, Honorable Minister, beyond extending the credit to government. It's interesting and insightful to note that in the Nerp, there is inclusion of digital banking and financial inclusion to allow for mobilization of savings, which is a proper platform and ways to go. As Bankers Association, we already have made significant investments in digital. We will continue to do so in support of the government agenda, but at the same time in support of the need of the economy. All these services by banks are dependent on a strong financial services sector, and BAM works closely with both the Reserve Bank of Malawi and the government just to ensure that the financial services sector remains strong and stable. We know, as we speak, government is looking at some of the debt restructuring that is in that Nerp document, and we know some of the exposures are sitting with the banks in Malawi. Our belief is that as we solution for government to come out of where it is now, we will not weaken the financial services sector, because the whole recovery plan is centered around the financial services sector playing its rightful role in providing capacity that otherwise would not be there without a strong financial services sector. Honorable Minister, ladies and gentlemen, there are a couple of more things that I could have covered, but in the interest of time, let me pause there for now. But just to say that Bankers Association will submit a written response, but we do understand the critical role that the banks are required to play in the recovery of the economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Temani. Another big round of applause. Without necessarily repeating what she has said, again, I think banks are saying we are ready. I'm part of the banks, and you've heard from our representative. I think some key sort of takeaways, resource mobilization. So we forgot to include probably Honorable Minister, in the Nerp, the Malawi Stock Exchange, because that's an option and cheaper if you speak to the CEO of Malawi Stock Exchange. So that's something that needs to be considered. And as she was speaking, I was also just reflecting on, we have two other institutions, EDF and the MAIC, I think. Those are also DFIs that are within Malawi, because as banks, commercial banks, we have short-term deposits. So it's not always easy for us to finance tenor longer than what, our deposits actually would allow. I think she's also spoken about accountability, KPIs. So I think credibility comes, especially for the banking sector, where you have confidence that if something is being done in the Nerp, if the outcomes that you can see, it means it gives confidence to the banks to come in. She's also spoken about institutional capacity. The structured markets come again, Honorable Minister. The exchange, I think mining will require something similar. Governor, I think something probably, and the Deputy Governor has pointed towards you, when EDF was being established, there was a portion which was the Project Preparatory Fund, which has not come into life yet. Maybe something like that comes up within this 5-year period. It would help, I think, in terms of getting the banks, when people are going with projects, they will be ready and banks will be prepared. I think the rejection rate would be much lower, but what it would also mean is that some of the aspects that have been highlighted by Madam Smaka here would mean that we would have quicker progress on some of the things. I think the role of the banks, I think, has been clearly articulated. What I picked out from Madam Simaka was on the digital payments. All the other presenters did share that. But what that would do, if we accelerate digital payments, it brings in a lot more people into the tax base. And it means more money being collected from a tax revenue side perspective. Infrastructure, I think we have very good examples. And here I'm not marketing, but I mean the road here, the 6th road rail, it's not just Standard Bank. That's a typical PPP arrangement. RIFA is there. There was the Old Mutual, Standard Bank, and CDH, which were there. I think NBS has done something similar. I think the other road from Bingu, the Parliament, all the way to the stadium. So the arrangements that are possible, and I think as banks we are ready, and I think what is required, just my final comments, Honorable Minister, is what Madam Sumaka spoke about, consistency and alignment amongst MDS, because as you speak to different ministries, you want to make sure that you're speaking to agriculture, you're speaking to finance, you're speaking to trade and industry, there's no contradiction, and also the monetary policy and the fiscal policy. Another big round of applause for Madam Sumaka. I'm mindful, Honorable Minister, we're coming towards the end of our session, but I did get a few people that were keen to contribute. We were supposed to have a fireside chat with the Honorable Minister, but he did respond to some of the questions or issues that I was going to ask him. But I just wanted to set a scene for maybe 2-3 minutes before I open it up to those that would want to contribute to. Is there one, Mr.? Okay, so I jumped that particular one. Apologies, Madam Betha Piri. Please accept my apologies. I think we've missed one institution, which is Medjin, representing the CSOs. Please join me in welcoming Madam Betha Piri in front here to share her presentation. I hope I don't get a fine. Okay.
It's very short. It's very short.
Okay.
The Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished guests, let me also ride on the protocol that has already been observed by speakers that came before me. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much. I'm speaking on behalf of Malawi Economic Justice Network, MEGEN, but also the National Advocacy Platform, NAP. And I bring to you the CSO's reflections on the draft Nerp. Really, these are voices that have been consolidated from the 3 pillars, NAP, MEGEN, but also the National Debt Alliance and the Task Force on Debt Transparency. We come in with #1 overall assessment of the NEP, the macroeconomic realism, the fiscal discipline versus the new spending pressures, but also the debt and the domestic borrowing. We also have recommendations around forex and exchange rate measures. But overall, at the end of it all, there is the CSO's priority message. What is it that we are actually talking about and recommending? So to begin with, the draft NEP, Honorable Minister of Finance, we notice that it provides largely an accurate diagnosis of Malawi's current economic crisis, and that this includes the unsustainable debt, persistent forex shortages, high inflation, low productivity, and food, just to mention a few. Its emphasis of this framework particularly on fiscal consolidation and the productive sectors, governance reforms and social protection is broadly aligned with the country's recovery needs. Others in the constituency really believe that it actually replicates the MIP1 strategy. However, let me be quick to mention that being a 5-year plan, members of the civil society fraternity feels that the plan has not been well prioritized. Let's go next. It is a plan that has both short-term stabilization measures, it has medium-term reforms, but also long-term transformation aspirations. All that has been put into a single framework with the time frame of 5 years. It is particularly, in a way, not sufficiently distinguishing what must be done immediately, but also what can be phased, what resources will realistically be available. So we've kind of put together short, medium-term, but also long-term aspirations together. So the document, really, looking into it with the rapid assessment we had, could benefit from the stronger prioritization, clear sequencing that is missing, greater financing realism, but also stronger implementation safeguards, just to mention a few. So what are we submitting in terms of the overall assessment? What we are saying is that the framework would be significantly, the credibility of the framework would be significantly strengthened by incorporating explicit assumptions. What assumptions really are we operating on? The annual milestones. What are we going to target every year within the 5 years period? But also the downside risk scenarios. These, we feel they are kind of missing, providing an overall assessment to the draft Nerp. Coming to the next pillar, which we assessed quickly on the macroeconomic realism, we are saying that the Nerp has projected, yes, growth, increasing to 6.5% by 2030, inflation declining by 8%, and that export would rise to 20.1% of the GDP. Revenue increasing also to 25% of the GDP, and that public debt would fall from the 60%, would fall from 86% to 60%. These are desirable outcomes, honorable ministers. However, the constituency also feels that the outcomes would really look to be highly ambitious in a way, because in the context of the economic scenario currently, we do appreciate that the current fragile macroeconomic indicators, the fiscal deficit, the public debt, have both elevated. We see that inflation is easing, yes, from the time that the budget was presented in Parliament, but still more we are only double digit, and so we feel that the targets would be overambitious, borrowing also from the MIP1, as this is a mirror of MIP1 strategy or framework. So what are we recommending as civil society organizations? We are saying the document should sufficiently explain financing conditions and policy trade-offs. Others have already mentioned that. But also, besides the policy trade-offs, it has to articulate those that are required to be achieved as outcomes. Quickly, we looked at the fiscal discipline versus the spending pressures. The Nerp correctly identifies, Honorable Minister, that the fiscal discipline, expenditure overruns, and also sustainable borrowing and weak domestic revenue mobilization, they are key contributors to the current crisis. We take note that its commitment to the austerity measures and the expenditure rationalization and debt restructuring and fiscal consolidation, we welcome it entirely as a constituency. However, this commitment appears difficult to reconcile with the proposal to allocate the 5 billion
to each constituency. Much more, there is also an indication that there would be dedicated resources for youth, women, sports, and arts to be funded. So what are we really recommending? The constituency-based development financing should also be phased. There should be also an element of performance-based in the articulation and implementation of the 5 billion constituency fund. It has to be phased, performance-based, but also fully integrated into the district development planning frameworks if really we are to achieve. Because this is a mirror of MIP1, and so outside the integration with the district development plan, we may risk challenges to actually confirm and reach out to the aspirations. There also must be robust accountability systems, independent audits to be coupled, but also public disclosures requirements, particularly the citizen oversight functions. The citizen engagement aspect has to be very prominent into the constituency-based development. There will be a lot of resources really that will be trickling down, and so those are some of the recommendations that we are recommending. Let's go next. It's just an illustration of debt and domestic borrowing. Let's go next, where we are talking about the need to correctly recognize debt as one of the most significant threats to economic recovery. With the public debt that has been estimated in the draft, that approximately it is at 86% of GDP, and interest paying alone, it's actually consuming 45% of the domestic revenue. What we're recommending is that government should prioritize the conclusion of debt restructuring negotiations. Where are we this far? The suspension of non-concessional borrowing, just to mention a few, but also the strengthening of debt management. That's what we are looking out for. Debt restructuring negotiations, so that we really are siphoned in a way that we should be able to move going forward. And realistically, or a radical call, a call for radical transparency was made. Let's go next, where we are saying, particularly on the debt, government needs to improve on one key or some key elements. Number one, we recognize, Honorable Minister, that the government does not consistently publish loan or full loan agreements or disclosures. On that one, what we are recommending is that some more details about interest rates, payment, repayment schedules, collateral clauses, sovereign guarantees, penalty provision, just to mention a few, procurement conditions. So this opacity creates a fertile for corruption. So the constituency is really looking out for a call for radical transparency, particularly elimination of the hidden debt. On the forex and exchange rate measures, what we are recommending is that forex reforms should be predictable, transparent enough, but also market responsive, and should be developed through a structured engagement with exporters, manufacturers, and the private sector, as others have already said, commercial banks, investors, but also the Reserve Bank of Malawi. We need to restore confidence in the formal forex market. That should be treated as a key recovery objective. Last but one is a message around governance, corruption, and implementation risk. The inclusion of governance, rule of law, and anti-corruption measures as a strategic enabler has been notable strength in the Nerp, and CSO entirely commends government for that, because what it will mean then, it recognizes the reality that economic recovery cannot be sustained in an environmental characterized by weak institutions. So we entirely support that, and we pledge our support, particularly on the pillar that tackled governance, corruption, and implementation risk. Lastly, we have the CSO's priority message to sum up it all. But before I take the summary of our message, Can we move next? Next slide. There are specific recommendations, Honorable Minister, that we've presented in the write-up that is going to be shared. Amidst several specific recommendations, what we are saying is in the context of digitalization, we need to resuscitate and merge the request to resuscitate and merge MTL and MPC, Malawi Post Corporation. We recognize, particularly the sector of education, that there is a lot of IT and programming graduates, as already alluded to, that are just staying idle. Perhaps we could use the reactivating or merging MTL and MPC, and also that we could be able to actually integrate digital mechanism along the same. Another key recommendation specifically, we are saying the one village, one product concept, can it be integrated in the community technical colleges if possible, NIF programs, AGCOM, and related investments. We should prioritize value chains and additions as already alluded to, but specifically we're looking at that OVOP concept can get incorporated in key technical colleges, but also key programs like AGCOM and NIF. We need to increase investment in organic farming, but also lastly, the need to reduce some taxes on solar and gas products, just to mention a few. So these are specific recommendations, Honorable Ministers. You will find them written in the write-up that has been submitted by Malawi Economic Justice Network, but also National Advocacy Platform. Lastly, we have a key message. Back. There is a key message that we back. Thank you. So what we are saying is that civil society broadly supports the direction of the Nerp and recognizes that the agency of decisive action to restore economic stability and growth, we recognize fully about that. However, the recovery will require more than ambitious targets, as we have pledged, and also policy commitments. What we are saying, the success of the Nerp will depend on the physical realism, the debt resolutions that government is going to do, the credible financing arrangements, strong institutions, and the policy consistency, but at large, citizen participation and effective implementation. The final version of the Nerp, therefore, should place greater emphasis on the prioritization, implementation discipline, accountability, transparency, and measurable outcomes. Malawi's greatest challenge is no longer in planning, but in execution. With those few remarks, we submit, like indicated, we have a paper that is going to be presented to you, Honorable Minister. Thank you so much for it. No, it's fine.
I thought a big round of applause, given that shows omitted. I was paying my reparations there. Yeah, great. I think great presentation. I think very clear, very candid, not surprising from CSOs. Assumptions, the Honorable Minister, have to be tested. They have to be realistic. But I think overall, what the CSOs are saying, they do support the Nerp. But I think there is need for testing of certain sort of assumptions. The recommendations, again, more or less mirror some of the things that have been shared by the others. Digitization comes up again. The first time I've heard about OVOP again in many years, but I think it's a concept maybe that needs to be considered. Renewable energy, solar. In actual fact, I think when one of the presenters was reacting, I was tempted to share. I mean, I visited Rwanda a couple of weeks ago. I mean, if you go into Rwanda, Kigali, you find that those bodabodas, they are all electric. Most of the vehicles are electric. Given, Honorable Minister, where we are, beyond just reducing taxes, maybe we need to be very intentional about getting EVs into Malawi and hybrids, because that will reduce the amount of foreign currency that we need to get, that is required. But again, maybe last, the prioritization, discipline, accountability, transparency, and very clear measurable outcomes, because the outcomes, the success, will depend on what comes out once we have implemented most of the aspects. We'll now go into a brief plenary session. I don't want this to be a Q&A, because then it will be who said what, the minister has to respond or somebody has to respond. Just like we've heard from the 5 institutions that I've shared, what I would suggest and recommend that if you have something that you want to say, it should not just be general commentary. You must be making a recommendation of what you think we should be doing. Remember, it's not the minister alone. It's not the CSOs or the development partners. Yeah, you come first. It's only, it's everybody else. We all have to contribute to the success of this National Economic Recovery Plan. When I wear my hat sometimes as the commissioner of the National Planning Commission, because people ask you, you haven't implemented anything. I said, but we only there to monitor. We're supposed to do this together. And we need to change that mindset. Because as Malawian citizens, all of us have to think about the solutions. So if you have an issue, a problem, a suggestion, it must be very clear. And if you think you know who should actually be looking at it, who needs to be choked, who needs to be held accountable, please suggest, because that's why we're having this consultation. But before I open it up to the audience, we have the privilege of having the governor here. And across all the different presentations, if you look at Nerp, foreign currency management comes up consistently. The exchange rate comes up consistently. And I'm sure wouldn't want to miss this opportunity to invite the governor. He's got his two lieutenants here as well, to maybe just share some of his thoughts around the Nerp, but also maybe some thoughts around what we need to be doing around foreign currency. It's a dicey area, because you don't want also to be speculating what he's thinking about together with his team. Let's welcome Dr. George Patrick to the podium briefly before we open it up. A big round of applause for him.
Good afternoon. I was not really supposed to speak because I was supposed to be getting feedback and inputs from yourselves, but I've been put on the spot. And a long time ago, I did learn, because my career started with the central bank as well. So I went to a central banking course in England, at the Bank of England, and they taught us what to say and what not to say as a governor of the central bank. They didn't know that time that I would actually be one. So I have to be very careful of what I say and what I don't say, because most of you may actually be taking positions, especially on the subject of the exchange rate. But first of all, what I would like to say is that if everything is said and done that has been mentioned in the ERP and also all your contributions, then we shouldn't be having a balance of payment crisis like we are having right now. Then we shouldn't be having a foreign exchange availability problem. We shouldn't also be having not just availability, but the margins that we are seeing between the black market rate and the official rate. So let me first of all say that signs that a country doesn't have a foreign exchange, I'm now talking about availability, is that the first sign and symptom is that you see most of the supermarkets are empty. But what we see here is that almost all the supermarkets are full. That means that we don't have a problem of availability of foreign exchange. We see all these car showrooms, roadside car showrooms, I would call them. That doesn't speak to non-availability of foreign exchange. But I think the main thing is probably the pricing of it. So I think, first of all, I should say that most of what has happened in the past, if you look at the figures that have been displayed, the money supply growth has been one of the major culprits. 51% money supply growth while your GDP is growing at less than 2%. That tells you a lot about the pressure that you are putting on foreign exchange in terms of demand for foreign exchange, because all those kwachas that you are putting into the system are actually demanding your foreign exchange. Any excess or any extra lending that commercial banks are going to make now, you agree with me that it almost goes into the demand for foreign exchange. And this is where now we have to tackle the problems. Why the money supply issues? Why all these other things that are making demand for foreign exchange very excessive? And one of the culprits the Honorable Minister mentioned was the fiscus. So excessive borrowing and all those other things that happened in the past, they were putting too much money into the system. Now we have to tackle the underlying causes. And we are tackling the underlying causes, which means that we are tackling the excessive money supply issues that are there at the moment. So 51%, about 4 or 5 months ago, now we are at 30% and it's going down. And that means that in future, if we tackle this in terms of our monetary policy, the demand for foreign exchange may not be as high as it is now. It will still be high. The other principles, because I will not mention the other specifics, as I said, it may be a sensitive subject on the market. But I think Daisy did mention that why should a company generate forex and not be able to access its own forex? We are also wondering why that is the case. So we are tackling that problem. Unfortunately, some of these things are in legislation, and therefore we have to make sure that we tackle that legislation. And as you are aware, legislation does take a bit of time to make sure that we get away with this. But the issue of surrender requirements, again, we are trying to modify our own exchange, and that's part of the program. I think it's in the NRP as well. We are trying to modify some of those exchange control issues. As you are aware, as they all say, exit barriers, which are our exchange controls, are always entry barriers. And therefore, if you have too many controls in terms of exit, those who are out there trying to come in, and you talked about remittances, they are not going to come in if we have all these negative policies surrounding how you can use your own money and how you can't use your own money. So we are tackling this. But as I said, some of these are in the legislation. So we are trying to make sure that these things are going to be in the best interest of those who are actually producing the forex, those exporters, or even those who are going to bring in import substitution industries, because that's the same thing. So that's what we are doing. But I think the underlying principles are that excessive controls, which there should be some controls, but excessive controls, you actually lose control. And this is what has happened. We have lost control because of excessive controls. Can you imagine if you want to administer this, administer that, then you lose control. And then the other principle, as I already pointed out, is exit barriers are entry barriers. And therefore, we are trying to tackle those. I think I should stop there. Otherwise, if I say much, then you may take positions of what I say. So, thank you very much.
I know some of you have already taken positions. You've read between what the governor has said. Please don't. You just burn your fingers. Yeah. Another big round of applause for Dr. Patrick. Yeah, thanks very much. So, could we have some roving mics? We'll spend maybe 10 to 15 minutes. When you raise your hand, if you have something to say, please introduce yourself and don't ask a question. You can ask those questions later. Please make a suggestion if you have an observation. I'll give you a minute or 2 minutes maximum to manage time. Can we have some roving mics? We can start right at the back there. I see 3, 4 hands. We have scribes, Honorable Minister. Yes, if you could stand and introduce yourself.
My name is Hello. My name is Master Dixon Funi, a lecturer at Malawi School of Government. Of course, we've made a paper which we'll be presenting later on, but I just wanted to highlight 1-2 things. Previously, we had a concept of moving away from consuming to predominantly an exporting country. As the CSO said earlier on, I feel we need to revamp the OVOP. It helped quite a lot. And there are a lot of machineries in the communities which are just staying. I think we need an audit of those machineries which we can utilize. I know somewhere in Dedza, Blantyre and other places. Similarly, we need to do more maybe on the expenditure control. Since we don't have much, why are we spending much on vehicles? We have a lot of vehicles which are languishing in offices. Maintenance culture, if we can improve on it and do an audit of those vehicles. It's not only vehicles, even houses. We need to do something on that. Thirdly, others will be able to share in the document. I was looking at the performance-related contracts of SOEs, which were abolished, but they continue enjoying the remuneration, and yet their performance is below standards. We can't compare their remuneration to the private sector, which is making profits like the banks. Yet when you look at their remuneration, what they're enjoying, you see Malawi as not a poor country. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We've taken note of your submissions, expenditure control, OVOP, and the SOEs in terms of what needs to be done. Thank you very much. Can we start at the back, then we'll be moving in front? Yes.
Modzi mwa anthu amene amakhala okhudzidwa kuona kuti Malawi ndi osauka amene amayenera akhale olemera. So ndili ndi ma suggestions amene ndikufuna kuti atatengedwa kukapangisana kuti National Recovery Plan yathuyi ikakhale reality. So mwezi akambidwa zinthu zona zokhazokha komano tikusowekera ma practical approach kuti tikhale ndi mfundo zimenezi kuti zikakhale kuti zatheka. Tinali ndi Vision 2020 because masoweka ma practical approach sinaphulekena kalikonse. Tinabwera ndi Malawi strategic goals sinaphulesokena kalikonse. So ngati sitikukhala ndi mfundo zimezi za practical, even national economic planning imetapanga pano pai ikhalaso yopanda phindu. Takamba nkhani ya corruption. Kunkhani ya corruption tinakhala tikuyikamba kwa nthawi itali kwambiri, koma corruption sikutha ku Malawi. So ngakhale takhala kuti tili ndi mfundo zabwino, tambopanga generate ndalama, koma corruption sitikuthetsa, ndiye kuti sitikaphulekena kalikonse. Tithetsa bwanji Katangale? Taona kale kuno justice system yathu mule kunoko sinagwire ntchito bwinobwino kuti ithetse Katangale. Ndikufuna ndipemphe boma lipemphe ma donors, ma bilateral donors athu atithandize kubweretsa majaji akunja amene adzaweruze milandu ya corruption paka time frame kuti tithane nayo yonse. Tikathana nayo tipange recover ndalama zimenezi. Tikapanga recover ndalama zimenezi tibwezere ngongole zimene zasamwitsa Malawi. Komanso anthu ena oti anaba ndalama
za 1 minute.
Mwina alini mwayi sadagwidwe alibe sanagwidwe palibe chilichonse chimene chachitika. Tikuwapempha paokha kuna kuti ndalamazo apange invest dziko munomo, atsegule makampani kuti alembe ntchito a Malawi, alembe ntchito ana athu. Ikhala ngati mbali imodzi yobwezeretsa ndalama zimenezi. Kunkhani ya tax base, kuti tichulukitse tax base tichulukitsa bwanji? Munafotokozapo nkhani ya formal sector. Formal sector imeneyi tilimbikitsa bwanji kuti zikhoma msonkho. Mwina anthu akabanza, anthu achipisi, amakala. Anthu amene wawa akhoza makhoma msonkho ngati tatapatsa incentive. Tinene kuti number 1 akhoma msonkho bwanji? Azikhoma msonkho mwina pogwiritsa ntchito mafoni awo, Airtel, Money kapena Mpamba. Komano account yawo ija tipange male apo ndi national ID kutanthauza kuti akakhoma msonkho uja ndiye kuti information yawo izipangidwa mali apo ndi ku national ID ndikuti tanthauza kuti ngati pali ma incentive amene boma likufuna kupanga mwachitsanzo ufuna ukatenga passport ufuna ukatenga driving license aziyang'ana who is a good taxpayer azipanga prioritize amene aja ndoti talimbikitsa anthu aja ngongole za nifi zija zisakhalenso mmene timaperekera za ndalezi yayi system izipanga generate kuti uyuyu wakabanzayi uyu wachipisiyu akukhoma msonkho molimbikira izingomaka generate azinandira message pa phone pake iweyo ndi good taxpayer you can contribute wapanga contribute chilo cha dziko la Malawi kotero wapanga qualify kutenga ngongole kunifi mwina ya 1 million in so doing azuzana anthu ama business aja kuti tu kamakhoma msonkho pali incentive ayamba kukhoma ndalama ziyamba kupezeka kotero kuna kuti boma likatero ngati lamba kuchulutsa kotengera ndalama ndikufunitsitsa litatsitsano mavati aja litatsitsa masatax aja chifukwa ndikunena chimene chifukwa chani ndikunena chifukwa kuti VAT ndi satax ali pakatundu amene Malawi amakula tsiku ndi tsiku so tikamakamba economic recovery plan sitimayikamba popanda relief ndi mavati akuluakulu amene alipowa maleves alipowa there is no relief
so mwambiri
I think bring the relief
30 seconds
we'll bring a relief ponena kuti VAT itsike mtengo pakatundu amene tikugula tsiku ndi tsiku kuti katundu jamuna sugar amakula 7,000 amukule 4,000 sopo amamukula muna 1,000 amukule pa 700 kwacha komano boma likwanitsebe kutolera ndalama lachulukitsa tax base lutoleranso kwa the informal sector zikomo kwambiri zina mukafuna fundo zilipo zambiri ndi kugairani ndakandikunenanso una kuti ndakandifuna uma ndi boma ndikuze mfundo zonse zilipo practical approach thank you
I think fundo zimenezo zofunika kuti muzitumize ndithu chifukwa mfundo zambiri zomwe mwakamba pamene pazofunikira za national ID yo ndi opportunity yayikulu imene anduna athu information alipo mpano akumva bwanenaso mfundo zina zokhuzana ndi katangale zimene zonso ziyang'anidwaso zikomo kwambiri.
Director of Ceremonies and honorable ministers, I want just to make a contribution based on what was earlier on presented by Ekama regarding mining. I perhaps am standing on a privileged position. I've just returned where I was working from outside this country. And I've noted that there are interests in understanding how much of the various minerals that we have. I've tried to find out from different people in the geology sector. They are saying, yes, we do have maps where we can find different minerals. But the problem we have is that we don't have the quantification reports of those minerals. Honorable ministers, I want to say that there is nowadays a concept that's being done where people are able to enhance their forex liquidity by sovereign asset monetization process, which starts with the quantification of our in-ground resources. If we do have the reports like the JORC reports or equivalent from the Canadian reporting system, these could be helpful for us to be able to access funds that could be generated from our in-ground resources. Next year or 20 years from now, we can be in a position to access part of that now. And that's called the Sovereign Asset Monetization Program, which can be explored further. I do have a report on that I can share. Two things quickly regarding the energy sector. I would like to say that I've had some interactions with different people who want to come to Malawi as well. There is an issue about enhancing private sector participation in the energy generation sector. But the process is always very long. At the moment, there is the SADC Remedy Earth Energy Acceleration Program, which is actually a low-hanging fruit which the government can tap on. They could bring in investments even without any implementation cost on the part of government. I would like to request that the government explore that program to enhance the energy generation. And finally, it's on the air transport. We've noted in the Nerp that there is a plan to modernize the Chileka airport and indeed develop Mzuzu airport. We do have challenges in terms of aircrafts. Currently, we don't have any of our own. But there's an area in the air cargo service space that we haven't talked about. We are always chartering planes for money, for Reserve Bank, and many others. And the aspects of exporting the horticultural products that we're talking about cannot be possible if we don't invest in the air cargo service space. I want to recommend that these could be explored in the Nerp. I have a report that I also share, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Can I request that you keep it as short as possible? Thank you very much. I think issues around air transport, energy sector, but also the sovereign asset quantification. I think we have representatives from the different ministries, but also the Minister of Finance. We'll be delighted to get your input to the Nerp along those areas. Yes, I will be very strict in terms of time because I see there's quite a lot of hands. I'll intervene if you take a little more time than necessary. Go ahead.
George Makuzumbayang. In the observation imodzi, I mean, of course, our minister and I collaborate kuti we need to bring my solutions. Also, ngoti ditsingo kamba zimene zingokhala kuti zibanga. Okay. I once went to Zambia, nabita Zambia huko. Kumene ku napeza kuti mpunga umene umachuka umeneko ndi nakonde rice. So I asked kuti umachokera kuti. Then I discovered kuti umachokera ku Tanzania. Chimene ndifuna kutanthauza chona kuti mwina ifeyo tikulephera kuti tuonjezere ma export base yathu because we are relying on other people. Koma I can assure you kuti ku Tanzania anthu aku Tanzania omwewo anasanduka ma off takers amene anapititsa nakonde rice kupita ku Zambia. Ku Zambia kuja ndikumamugulitsa panopa ndithokuza ndiona kuti mwina per week ma trucks ajama 30 tons ajama tokhala kuti ndi 100 per week kuchokera kujani kodi kuchokera ku Tanzania. And if you monetize it in dollars, it's about $30,000 to $50,000. Nde ife we have kilombero timango sunga sitigwisa ntchito china chilichonse koma if we can utilize the model ya anzathu aja tito na feso kupanga establish kuti tizirumiza rice uja maiko osiyana chimene chingatiyambise ndi chani tipeze anyamata amene angomaliza school kapena ali ndi business tathandizire kuti tatulutse apite mdziko mwina mmene muja akhala ngati ma off takers akatundu wathu uja. This model even China ikupanga zomwezo ambiri sakupanga zinthu zomwezo. That's why maybe they are growing up because you cannot find kuti mwina munthu from Zambia azikagulitsa chinthu cha ku Malawi. We need to find our own Malawi people. We invest kapena kuapanga spread apite kunjako akakhale ngati ma off takers akatundu wathu. That means we have created our own market. In so doing we expand export. Secondly, okay, 1 minute.
No, you have 30 seconds because you.
Anyway,
mindful, yeah.
Thank you. I'll just like other things. So thank you.
Okay. The Martin Dibempe, everybody wants to say something. It's almost 2 o'clock, so I'll allow for maybe 1 or 2 questions, and then we need to be wrapping up because we can always provide those contributions because no one is also sticking to the time, you know, because everybody is talking and explaining. Make the suggestion. There's an area. The Nerp is very clear. What is it that you're recommending?
Yes,
if you.
I'm Robert Yasin Manjawala, and inspiring in EV industry. I think it's all the same. Kumakala if Malawi woni na kuti tilipana matu magula mafuta dzikomo. Ndichomwe ndimafuna kwambiri ndichonena kuti we should have a presidential order or executive order. Kunena kuti let's formalize ma EVs Malawi muno. Tiyambe ni ma ministries athu, departments and agencies. And ban magali morose amagets. And I'm saying this unapologically for is easy in 5 years to come ziri vureferom. Nde mwina kuambira kutsogolo kuno tukunena kuti magali morose aboma adzikhala amagets. And I'm saying this unapologetically. Thank you.
And una mazimvera nda ST yeti recommendation imeneyo ya immediate. I'll take 1 more. Please, you have 1 minute. Strictly 1 minute. Otherwise, I will intervene. Yes, let's come in front here.
In Frederick, Pile Malata. Ndikufuna ndipeleke suggestion yanga maka tikondwere poyamba kuti the chief secretary ali mu meeting ino. Ifeyo ndi amene timakhala ku bottom, koma amene amatiyendesera chuma chathu ndi aku civil service, and zambiri zikusokonekera ku civil service, and ma president athu akugwa kuzisankho chifukwa cha civil service. Chimene timafuna tipemphe ndiyonena kuti civil service ikuyenera kuti ikonzedwe, chifukwa it's high time kuti panopa tizipezeka kuti ESCOM izikhala kuti tikuipanga funding instead of ESCOM funding ma project a dziko la Malawi. Tikupezeka kuti tikugulira ma chief executive outer board drama magalimoto odula instead of kuti water board izichita provide madzi kwa anthu ku dziko lino la Malawi. Ndeti mafuna kuti tipereke suggestion yonena kuti through the chief secretary kuti akonze civil service. Ifa corruption ikuchitika ndi ma civil service, koma omangidwa amakhala anthu andale. Ndeno ndaonaponso kuti meeting yathu always even ikakhala budget consultative meeting amabwera ndi aekama bankers association, zizungu zake zimakhala zokhazo. Tinafunika kuti tisinthe sopano, we should go back to the bottom ground, kuti tipeze anthu enieni amene akukumana ndi mavuto enieni kuti azafotokozere a minister aziziwa zenizeni zimene zili pa ground rather than ma conference ama hotelo ngati mene tilili pano. Zikomo kwambiri anditsimikizira nduna ndimayankhula ndi azembere kuti consultation ku cabinet komanso ifika kumusi ngati mene tinapangira ndi masomphenya athu a dziko la MW 2063. So that's a very good suggestion. We'll get one more here. Yes, because we need to be wrapping up. I mean, we could go on and on and on and on. Yes. You have 1 minute.
Good afternoon, everyone. Choyamba.
Yes, go ahead.
Choyamba titokoze anduna. Ine ndaima pano dzina langa ndine Charles Chatapiri kuyimira anzanga aulumali komanso amene ndi bungwe la Power AIDS Control Service Organization and community radio station. Ineyo ndikuthokoza chifukwa chakuti mumatilola kudzakhala nanu ndikumaperekapo maganizo athu ifeyo ngati anthu aulumali. Pamene mapulani otere achitika ifeyo anthu aulumali tizilengako mbali. Ndiye ndimangofuna ndipereke suggestion imodzi popeza mwandipatsa 1 minute mwinaso yakha 30 seconds. Ndima suggestion yanga ndiyakuti ineyo sindiona koma ndili ndi radio station 2019 bwana mdatisiya mmalere radio station ije limafuna izipitirirabe. Ndiye popeza anthu na information ajali pano ndathokoza kwambiri ndikhulupirira mutiganizira. China ndichakuti ifeyo anthu aulumali timafuna titengeko mbali pandale ndipo nadzayima anthu okwana 61 pa anthu 61 anasankhidwa kwa awiri okha. Sindiye kuti ena fezelu linalibe koma linalibe ndalama. So tikhulupirira kuti ndi mapulani yawo I think mutipanga involve bwana. Zikomo kwambiri.
Zikomo kwambiri. I know kuti we have burning issues. Everybody wants to contribute, but if I open it up, maybe I'll have one last one there, and then we'll close. Maybe one and the last one here, and that's it. I'll come back to the emails just a minute. Yes, yeah, thanks.
Komande kuthokoza kuti you have recognized me kuchokera ku Blantyre kudzakhala nanu pano. Choyamba nene kuti tithokoze Mulungu potipatsa mpata kuti tidzelankhulana nkhani ngati izi. These are matters of national importance, not personal, not for anybody's importance. Kama we are representing the common citizen. Mundilole, the moderator, the way you are moderating speaks volume that you are standing for a common person. That is highly acknowledged and it has to be commendable. Secondly, Mundilole ndithokoze the high table. Ikuoneka kuti they are here for a good purpose. And they know what they are here for. And they dutifully understand the real agenda and motive of why people are here. And on the same, anduna mundivetsetse chinthu chimodzi. Mulindo udindo. Waukulu kwambiri. Chifukwa chinthu ichichi National Economic Recovery Plan. Siku yamba, nthawi yoyambaso idalipo. If you may recall, Honorable Minister, padali nthawi ina pamene kunali nthawi ya National UNDP, there was another function of this nature. Koma ida sida pitilile, koma ina zabwera so ina, kena kosu kuna zabwera ina, imne kunali so another important function that was constituted, which I think kunali Dr. Chatagalala Muntali. It was a very important function.
Excuse me, there are some dignitaries that are waiting for the minister, so yes. I'm mindful of the time.
I know Kuti, it's important and it's mindful. Yes. That is important. The issue that I want to raise is also very important. Mundilole, ndatokoze Reserve Bank Governor. Chifukwa, mene abwerera pano, aonetsa kunena kuti akudziwa chimene abwereranso. Bwana Governor, ndikupempheni. Mukakabwerera ku drawing board, mukaone mene mavuto anthu a monetary policy issues zimakhala. Ngongole kapena zinthu zovuta zimene amakumana nazo. Muone mene mungathe kuwathandizira. Komanso mene mungathe sopanga review malinga ndi ngongole mene anthu amatha kukhalira and how the issue can be seriously considered. And finally, mundilole ndathokoza amayi yawo. Madi mai ndani aku. Madam, congratulations that part of the UN bodies are well representing the concerns and grievances of different citizens, and you need to be commended, and we wish to thank you very much. And many, many thanks for every citizen, and we wish to commend every citizen for this forum.
Thank you. Unfortunately, sir, we have to curtail this conversation now. I know, I think we've got emails in front of us here. If I could request that those that have got suggestions, if you could use the emails. I'm really mindful of the fact that I think, okay, Amalwana.
Emmanuel Kaunda, Vice Chancellor for Lirongo University of Agriculture and Natural Resources. The distractors of Nerp, of possible distractors, which are climate-related shocks and even geopolitical interferences, must be factored in this as part of the assumptions. That's very critical. But that also calls for evidence-based decision makers or decision making instantaneously. And I would want to propose that in that institutional coordination, we should have a multi-sectoral think tank. Private sector talked about private sector government, but I thought it should be more inclusive, but which should be based and should be able to curate information from research. And I'm proposing that deliberately and intentionally, perhaps government should create chairs in various research institutions or even universities, but each topical, so that these are endowed chairs, given resources, doing research, and also linking up with our students. We've got huge knowledge pools in our universities, which can fit in that and through this think tank and advising. The entry point could be cabinet, could be PS, could be NPC. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think very good suggestion. I think Madam Deze Kambalame, you may want to involve the universities on the PPDF, because I think what is touching on the sector approach, and I will let Madam Deze, I think he talked to that. I don't want to preempt what the SC will share, because as he shares, I think he's the next steps, and maybe it may cover some of that part now. I know everybody wants to go on, and this is one of the first times that I've seen being at a forum, a conference, people are so attentive. They are still there. We haven't had lunch. So I wanted, on behalf of the Minister, Honorable Minister, to thank everyone, to thank the Honorable Minister himself for gracing this occasion, but also to thank every participant here for the quality contributions that you've made. I think it shows the commitment that we all have to the recovery and the long-term development of the country. As I mentioned at the beginning when we were starting, just a recap, I am driven by the belief of Malawi. At Standard Bank, we say Malawi is our home, we drive our growth. And I think you see some sort of similar kind of purpose and aspiration for many others. But I think just having that aspiration is not enough. It's about the discipline of the execution that we take forward. The things that we've discussed here, what's contained in the Nerp. We need to make sure that we move forward with those actions. So as we conclude, I just wanted to reflect on something that Dr. Winford Masanjala once said. I mean, most of you know Dr. Winford Masanjala. He's now back at the University of Malawi. He reminds us that Malawi's strongest growth period, roughly 1954 to 1984, was not accidental, Honorable Minister. He speaks about deliberate choices. He speaks about productivity-focused strategies. He speaks about investments. I think he made this presentation at one of the ECAMA conferences. And I think he talks in his presentation that he made, I think it was last year, about MDC, about ADMAC, about press holdings, about RONLO, and about many institutions. And today we've heard about private sector. If we're gonna get private sector to get going, if we're gonna get private sector to get involved, we need to go back to basics because it's worked before. I'm tempted to even look at the era of 2004 to 2009, Honorable Minister. What worked then? It was involvement of private sector, everybody getting involved. So this issue of private sector is not just a tick box. It's real. PPDF, how we work together, how we harness this, how we all come together is going to be very critical. So the responsibility before us, and probably the Minister and the ST will say this much better, is to translate what we've actually discussed into action from our respective institutions. So as you leave today, I encourage each one of you to go and probably do three things. One, define clearly what your institution will do differently to support implementation. If you don't have an institution, you are the institution. What are you going to do differently? Secondly, we need to focus on few high-impact priorities and deliver them consistently. If you read many reports, whether from World Bank, IMF, EIU, we are accused of not being consistent. We start, we stop. So the second thing is about what are those few things. Then thirdly is about ensuring that your efforts are anchored in accountability. Good governance is good business. With a clear ownership, measurable outcomes, but also regular tracking of progress. I repeat, regular tracking of progress. I think Madam Temani Simaka would not have put it better. If you want a bank to have confidence in whatever you want to bring to a bank, they want to see real outcomes, something that will show progress. So ultimately, the success of the Nerp, Honorable Minister, and everyone of us who are here will not be judged by the strength of its design. It's beautiful. I've got a printed copy, but the discipline with which we implement it. So we need to carry forward the lessons from both our history, but also today's dialogue. We need to commit to delivering to tangible results for the economy. We need to deliver for the people of Malawi. Ena akutimvera munomu, mwamva kale mmene amayankhula kumbuyo, amanena kuti nthawi zambiri timakhala kuti we are coming to these hotels, to these conferences. Then we come again, we come again. Let this day be a day of change, of mindset change, a day where we all rise up, private sector, civil society, development partners, donor community, and everybody, and we've heard it all, and that we come back when we write history, we'll be saying that the Nerp was actually launched, that consultation that happened on that particular date. So on behalf of the organizers, once again, Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for giving me this opportunity to be the Program Director, and also to the Secretary of Treasury, all presenters, and all dignitaries that are here. I'd like to, wish you safe travels back. But at this point in time, allow me to invite the Secretary of Treasury, who then probably invite the Minister to close the workshop. Thank you very much. You have been a brilliant audience.
I think we need to give the moderator a round of applause. He has been a very good moderator. Thank you. Thank you. We are now nearing towards the end of our interface workshop. And let me also thank you, the audience. You've been such a wonderful audience. You've been resilient. Since morning, you are still here. It shows your commitment and your interest towards developing our country. As it has been said already, I think this is a national, issue. All of us, must rally behind the implementation of the Nerp. Once we have consolidated the various comments that have ensued through this particular discussion, and we make a difference in terms of the welfare and the development of our people in Malawi. We have received a lot of very rich comments, which will go a long way in finalizing the Nerp itself. And in terms of going forward, we will be receiving the comments, and we have put there the email addresses which you can use to submit your comments. And you will also get the various papers that have been presented here, very rich papers. And furthermore to that, we will still open this window for receiving comments. I think we are saying we need to receive all those comments by the 15th of June, so that it gives us time for us to do further consultations. We need to interface with the cabinet, for instance, but we've also learned this afternoon that there is also need for us to go to the grassroots as well. So we'll try through the Honourable Minister to also make a window as well to have a discussion with the other groups of people at that grassroots, so that we make the Nerp very rich, compact, and tight, so that when we implement it, it can deliver what we intend to restore the economic growth and bring about the much needed development of our country. I believe this time around we need to do things different. And it's all incumbent upon all of us here to do just that and support this particular process. So having said that, at this particular stage, I've been advised that we also have the Minister of Information here. He just wants to greet us, give us a few words, and then thereafter, I will ask the Honourable Minister of Finance, Economic Planning and Decentralization to close the meeting. But soon after we have closed everything, there's a lunch provided. I think let us continue with the discussions over lunch, so to speak, and then we close the day. I'm also advised here, yes, that we need to have a picture outside there. I think they have prepared, some seats outside, so that we also have something to remember with for our meeting, today.
And I think I've been advised that in the photo shoot, the high table has been invited, the heads of mission, all principal secretaries, and all representatives of the various key institutions who are here. And of course, the moderator, of course, has to be there as well. So in that kind of order. Okay. And again, you are also invited to join the minister over lunch. The people that are mentioned here, to at least take a photograph, a picture with the honor minister. In that kind of order. So maybe now, can I ask the honor minister of information, Dr. Namalomba, to just say a few words. Over to you, honor minister. Thank you.
Quickly, without much ado, and mindful of the time, I will recognize the Minister of Finance and all the people seated at the high table and all of you. In the discussion, the Minister of Information and Communication Technology was reflected, and I thought that it's proper that I come and speak on a few things. Number one, the question that has been posed to us is, what is it that we can do differently going forward? I would want to add to that question to say, what is it that we can also, as we do it differently, we can do it consistently and efficiently? And the answer lies in digital transformation. You take the case of banking sector, how they have transformed over the years. Part of their transformation is accredited to digital transformation. With that case study, I would want us to also bring the digital transformation in the recovery plan. We got a period of 5 years. We don't have much time, but we can speed up the processes, the initiatives that are embedded in this recovery plan. One of the issues that I would want us to talk passionately about is the payment gateway system. In this country, we do not have that. And I would want the Reserve Bank governor to champion this. A payment gateway system that will enable us to implement the digital banking. We need to have the digital banking. We needed to make sure that we discourage paper money. We encourage virtual money. So that is what I wanted us to challenge ourselves. And one more thing is somebody, and I just want to share with you this fact, that imagine if all our people, for example in South Africa, maybe we have about 1 million Malawians in South Africa, they were able to pay or to contribute to home 500 rands per month. How much money are we going to have in this country? It's about 5 billion rands every month. And you multiply that by 12 months. Why am I sharing these facts with you? We may also need to consider exporting labor. We have a pool of young people that are graduating. Let's consider exporting this pool. We will be earning the forex that we need. With those few remarks, I must thank you, and I thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also take this advantage as well to also thank our ladies. Today, they have led the discussion in this room. And thank you very much, ladies. Keep pushing us for the good of Malawi. At this particular stage now, let me take the opportunity to invite the Honourable Minister of Finance to make his closing remarks. Thank you, Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, ST. All protocols observed. I would like to, as I am closing, allow me to express my sincere appreciation to all of you for your active participation, candid contribution, and also commitment to Malawi's economic recovery and transformation agenda. Over the course of our discussion, one message has come out clear. The message is there is broad consensus on both the challenges that our economy is facing and also the actions required to address them. While ideas or perspectives may differ on specific approaches, there is a strong agreement that Malawi must act and must act now. We have also agreed that discipline, accountability, transparency, and focus are needed to restore our macroeconomic stability and place the economy on a sustainable growth trajectory. I've listened carefully on the issues raised during our discussion. Participants have also emphasized on the need to move beyond identifying challenges and beyond rhetoric and focus more on implementation and delivery. There has also been important recommendation on strengthening accountability and improving coordination, ensure policy consistency, enhancing private sector participation, and creating a more supportive environment for exporters and the productive sectors. They are valuable contributions, and I wish to assure you that we will carefully consider them and refine them and implement as part of the National Economic Recovery Plan. As government, our immediate priorities remain clear and have been stipulated in the Nerp. First, we must strengthen food security and agricultural productivity. Agriculture remains the backbone of our economy and a key source of livelihood for many Malawians. We therefore take seriously the recommendations that have been highlighted. There's issues of climate shocks. There's issue about commercialization. There are a number of issues that have been highlighted. I just want to assure you that they have been taken care of. I'm also mindful of the recommendation that we need to address the foreign exchange challenge. Actually, the elephant in the room is Forex. Unfortunately, as the governor said, we couldn't have said it all. For some of us that have done trading in foreign currency, we wouldn't say it, otherwise you will take positions. And that will mitigate even what you want to achieve. But I want to assure you that together with the Reserve Bank of Malawi, we know exactly what needs to be done. And I'm sure with your support, we should be able to achieve that. By the way, all of us who have been in the private sector, so we know, because we have also been on the other side. So we know exactly what the problem that we are facing. Obviously, this requires a deliberate shift towards increased exports, value addition, import substitution, and greater competitiveness of our productive sectors. We have also taken note of the concerns raised regarding access to foreign exchange the operating environment for exporters, and the need for continued engagement with the private sector to remove barriers that constrain production and export growth. Thirdly, we must sustain fiscal consolidation and strengthen public finance management. Economic recovery cannot be achieved without macroeconomic stability. We must continue improving domestic revenue and mobilization, rationalizing expenditure, addressing leakages, and also ensuring that scarce public resources are directed towards high-impact investments that support growth and job creation. Well, on this, I would like to agree with some of the recommendations that have been made. We have the recommendations made by ECAMA. We have taken note of your recommendations. We have also taken note of the recommendations made by UNIMA, University of Malawi. We have noted the recommendations made by MECHI. We have taken a lot of takeaways that we have taken from the presentation. And I want to assure you that even the proposal that has been made by MCCI on the issue of engagement with the private sector, and that we should have the private-public dialogue forum, I think very important. And I'm sure together, let's make sure that we have that again. And I'm sure you're aware that it was my time when we pushed this, and I'll make sure that we have that engagement. It's very important in our policy dialogue. I also like to ask the audience to support government, to support our president. Our president means well. He always tells us, I'm sure the Minister of Information will confirm, what he wants is to leave a legacy and change the lives of Malawians. He said he's a president not because he wants to benefit anything. What he wants is Malawians to see a difference. That's why, actually, that's why the tough decisions that will be made, they are quite painful. But I can assure you, Malawians, at the end of the day, they will see light. Malawians will appreciate someday, not today. I do recall during Bingo's time, people made the noise. But now he's a hero. After he's gone. You get it? That's what he wants. And our president needs our support. The other issue that I want to ask us to own the Nerp. It is our document. We need to implement it together. In all the presentations that have been made, I think we have agreed that we need to work together to get this done. If we work together, you find out that all this that we are discussing now, it will be water under the bridge because we have worked together. I also like to ask our friends that were there in the past 5 years, they also need to own the Nerp. What we are doing now is to clean the mess they created. What we are doing now is to clean the mess they created. So it's unfortunate they're also blaming us for cleaning the mess. I don't think they would want the Malawians to continue suffering. They need to own it. I should say that I'm glad that there are some ministers before who appreciate what we are doing. When I'm talking about mess, maybe I need to highlight some, because when we're saying there's a mess that has happened, maybe you don't know what has been done. We have audits that are ongoing now. Audits at the NEGAFA, audits at the Green Belt Authority. We have audits at NIF. We have audit at Salima Sugar. We have audits at EDF and EDF. We have even in my own ministry of MRA, we have those audits. And there's a proposal that I get it that those people that may have taken government money need to account for it. Our president, being a lawyer, he doesn't want what was happening before. You just arrest people for the sake of arresting, just because they belong to another party or because they come from somewhere else. Our president, the lawyer, he wants to make sure that when we take somebody to court, there's evidence. There's evidence. Actually, I was happy, for example, I'm sure you have followed the case of Green Belt. Because there's evidence, the matter is in court. You know what has happened? People have just accepted, no, can we now discuss how I should pay back? You get it? That's the kind of thing that we need, and I can assure you, you will see it, because what is coming out, there was a total mess. In almost all the parastatals, you have mention of water boards. I hope they are chief executive from our water boards. There's a total mess. Actually, if we're not careful, we'll have a challenge in that sector, and we need to address it now. We have a lot of challenges in NIF, all these issues that I've mentioned, but we are saying, because I know a question I've been saying, we are saying there's a mess. Where's the mess? We have now, the audits are coming in so clear, and I can assure you there will be more repentance. People will be repenting for what the evils that they did, because it's so clear. We planned to have a press conference so that we go into details what was happening. But the Attorney General advised to say, no, we are going to compromise. You get it? Because they have to take the matter to court, am I right? Otherwise, I'm saying this because it's quite painful to some of us, where you know the mess they've created, but they will stand there to pretend they are clean and they are playing holier than thou, which is very unfortunate. That's why I'm asking them to own the Nerp, support government. After all, government is like a boat. We're in a boat. If it collapses, we all collapse. This is what I would want to ask. The problem that we have here, they are real. There's also a comment that has been made. I like the comments that have been made by Megin on the issue of, I think you have touched on a number of issues, like strengthening the credibility of NEP. Very important, and I would want to agree with you. You have talked about having year targets, milestone. I agree with you. But I also want to plead with you, and I'm sure our excellencies, you agree with us that most of the money now from donor communities is being channeled through NGOs. They are avoiding us for obvious reasons. The money is now sitting with NGOs. When you ask for transparency, if you ask for accounts, I do recall we had an NGO act or bill in Parliament asking for accounts audit. We had demonstrations. We had demonstrations. So what we are saying is, together, let's preach what we do. Am I right? Because there's a lot of money I can guarantee you that is being channeled through non-governmental organization. Let's do that. You mentioned about CDF. Actually, I'm sure World Bank is here. They can confirm to you that CDF is performance-based. It has also incorporated, it has been incorporated in the district development plan, as we have rightly said. And also even accountability systems have been put. Actually, we'll have a dashboard tracker. Actually, it will be online. You can be able to go to my Koswese, see how much has been allocated in my Koswese, the number of projects that we are doing, how much has been spent in my Koswese. It will be online. It's called the dashboard tracker. I mean, some of the donors here have helped us to have that. So I want to agree with you that, but we need your support to make sure we do that. Similarly, we also need in your projects, because you also are implementing projects, you need to have the same, what you call a tracker, that we also be able to know what you are doing. We need to know exactly how the real resources are being implemented. The other last thing that I want to comment was a comment mentioned also from School of Government. I'm told you were at the economic plan, it was at EPND. I think there's a comment from government, School of Government. Very good comments. There's the issue of taking stock of our assets, both buildings and vehicles. We 100% agree with you. We need to track where our assets are. We have a lot of assets that are sitting idle out there that need to be addressed. And also another important thing that you have mentioned, which I will need support, is the enumeration of non-performing institutions. We have parastatals, chief executives, they still want to get an increment that government implements, just because they are government, regardless whether they are performing or not. And you'll be surprised, even the benefits they are getting, they are comparing it with other institutions like the banks, because they are a chief executive like another chief executive. I thought that needs to be changed. It must also be performance-based. And this is something that we needed to do together. I'm saying this because I'm sure if you look at, there have been studies that have been done on the performance of our statutory corporations. They're all non-performing. Actually, some of them are the verge of collapse. Most of them, the board will meet just to ask the Treasury to fund them. They have no clue in terms of what needs to do. So this is one of the issues that I would want to agree. And the last one was the Puziromvula. I think that was good. The message is clear. I wanted also to agree with you. And lastly, ndiyankula nchichewa kuti president athu akuziwa kuti Malawi akuvutika. Iwonso wakhalanso kumuza kuti akuziwa mavuto amene akumana nawo. Komanso kungokhala osachitapo kanthu ndikuti mavuto amene apitirira. Chifukwa lero president ativomera kuti tikhale ndi mkumano umene wotchedwa National Economic Recovery Plan. Tikuziwa anthu akuvutika. By the way, even myself as a minister, I'm also suffering because the taxes that we are having, I'm also having the same. You get it? My friends, my relatives, they're equally suffering. By the way, I have an old father at 93 who has some grocery in the village. The other day, he calls me while in the office. Kuda chimwene. Nisukuti msonko igwenda bai. Navokuti somo kweza so misonko. You get it? Yeah? But being my father, he's the boss. I just said, "Ndakumva ni bambo tikambirana." You get it? So it means even my relatives are feeling it. So I'm with the people. I sympathize with the people. What I need is support to address this. And in a few months to come, we should be remembering that we had these problems, but we have addressed that. I hear what NGOs say. I listen to the social media. Tell them, oh, remove this. But then you are saying, if I do this, what are the consequences? Should we remain where we are? I can assure you it is disgracing. You go to a meeting, international meeting, where Malawi is given an example. We went to African Development Bank in Congo Brazzaville. Malawi was actually an example of why debt to equity, debt to GDP ratio is the highest. I'm sure you can agree with me. Can you imagine you are there, you're a Minister of Finance? Can you be proud? It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. Something has to be done, and done now and not later. Otherwise, I'll be asking myself, why should I be there if I cannot address the problem that are there? So we are together. And please, Malawians, you need to understand this. We are in a difficult situation. We are on a rock and hard place, and a solution will be found. I don't want to say much, only to thank you for your support, for your coordination. Let me also thank the governor for the close collaboration that we, so far, we have achieved. Together, we can move mountains. Together, we can address the challenges that we have. I want to also to say thank you to Standard Bank, because they have paid for everything here. They have paid for everything, including the lunch. So what else can we ask for? We would like to thank you. And obviously, when you're talking about partnership, that's what we're talking about. We need that partnership to get things done. So we thank you very much for your support. The success of the National Economic Recovery Plan will not be determined by the quality of the document alone. It will be determined by the quality of its implementation. We therefore fully agree with the view expressed during this engagement that accountability, monitoring, delivery must also be at the center of the agenda. Government is committed to strengthen implementation mechanism, fostering regular engagement with stakeholders, and ensuring transparent monitoring of progress against agreed targets. We want Nerp to be judged not by intentions, but by results. I also wish to emphasize that economic recovery is not a government project alone. It is a national undertaking that requires the active participation of the private sector, development partners, the academia, civil society, and every Malawian. We therefore look forward to strengthening our partnership and maintaining continuous dialogue as we move together into the implementation phase. With these remarks, I'd like to thank you, and God bless you, and God bless Malawi. Thank you.
They say when the Honorable Minister has spoken, no one else can speak. I think for me it's just announcements. One announcement is what was made earlier on. But just to thank the Honorable Minister for those closing remarks. We'll have a group photo outside with the Honorable Minister. I think the list has been provided. And then afterwards, I think there's a list that was also provided, the same list. Those that were mentioned should join the Minister for lunch at the hotel. But I think there was also lunch served within the conference facilities. Travel well. Let's implement NEP. I think we can do it. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Well, that's how things have ended here at the Bingu International Convention Center, where the Minister of Finance was holding a workshop on National Economic Recovery Plan, NEP. This was a consultative meeting that has involved various stakeholders for their input towards efforts to recover the country's economy from 2025 up to 2030. So we have had presentations, comments, suggestions from people that attended this conference. So this is where we ended this live transmission from the Bingu International Convention Center here in Lilongwe. On behalf of the crew that has been here, my name is Patrick Dambula, handing you back to our broadcasting house.